The seemingly ageless goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury has been traded to the Chicago Blackhawks. Moose, we're going to start with you. This is a guy who has won 3 Stanley Cups, a Vezina winner, coming off a really, really good year, even at age 36. What are your expectations? What do you make of this move?
I don't really know what to make of this move. I don't know what the Chicago Blackhawks are doing. Why do they need Marc-Andre Fleury? You know, they had a breakout season from Kevin Lankinen. They have another young goalie, Malcolm Subban. Are they this close to the Stanley Cup that they need Marc-Andre Fleury? It feels like they're maybe doing Vegas a favor or something. From a fantasy perspective, you should expect Marc-Andre Fleury to see a lot of shots. The Blackhawks give up a lot of shots. I think it makes him very interesting for DFS. He's coming off like a huge season, like you mentioned, and now he's in a fantasy-friendly role. So weird move. We'll learn more about it as the day goes on. But for fantasy purposes, yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury could be big time for daily fantasy next year.
AJ, I mean, this is just happening, obviously, so it's going to take some time for the DK Sportsbook and elsewhere to reflect everything. But does a move like this, Geoff said, obviously, good for fantasy, but is it going to change odds significantly in terms of making them a cup favorite?
I absolutely think it should. I mean, I don't know about cup favorite odds, but it should certainly improve them. They just brought in the best goalie in hockey. I mean, if I had known, I'd have put my Fleury jersey on before we even started, guys. So yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a huge Marc-Andre Fleury fan. I think it's a huge upgrade in the Nets. Obviously, they're taking on that contract. It gives them a little bit of time to give Lankinen, some. He went through a lot of growing pains last year, and this gives him some time to develop him and not just throw him to the wolves like they did last year. And I think actually it's a great move for Chicago. I think they're close enough. They're getting Jonathan Toews back. They still have Patrick Kane. They added Seth Jones, which is an upgrade from Duncan Keith. So I think this is a team that should have upward mobility in terms of the sports book there. Now, again, cup contender, maybe not quite, but Vezina Trophy winner, best goalie in hockey, 3-time Stanley Cup champion on the books. You got to be in the mix, right?
Paul, as we're accustomed to around here, you laughed at your coworker. So what are your thoughts on this move?
I can't wait to see how long it takes him to get his new sweater now. But in all seriousness, that was the big hole in Chicago for the last couple of years. I like what they've done to bolster themselves offensively and along the blue line. So it just makes sense that they try to address the situation in goal, which it was a weakness despite Lankinen's kind of breakout performance as a rookie. They now have a veteran to complement him, and really he should be all ears, keep his mouth closed and listen to all the tricks of the trade that Fleury will pass down. That might be his most important value going forward this season. So a great move by the Hawks, I think.
Guys, we got news coming in fast and furious, too. It looks like the Sharks are going to be buying out Martin Jones. I don't think that's a great shock, but obviously it is news nonetheless. Braden Holtby is going to be bought out by the Canucks. So we're going to have goaltenders moving around this offseason. It's clearly underway. But let's go back to, AJ, something you brought up, and that is, of course, Seth Jones, another guy that is on his way to Chicago. He's there now, here for the Blackhawks, and Duncan Keith gone. So from a fantasy perspective, what do you make of the Jones move?
Well, I think it's a slight uptick in his fantasy value here. You know, with Columbus, he was essentially splitting that quarterback spot with the power play unit with Zach Werenski. Here in Chicago, it'll be all him on that number one power play unit. Again, I mentioned some of the names of the guys he'll play with. And I think it's a good, like I said, uptick in fantasy value for him. It's obviously a team that thinks they can be competitive, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get back over the 40-point mark, maybe even push for the 50-point mark, which he's hit once in his career.
Paul, what do you think? Is there more fantasy value now for Jones?
Significantly more. They signed him to an extension, 8 years and $76 million, translating to an annual cap hit of $9.5 million. Alex, that should tell you all you need to know about how he's expected to become a cornerstone of this defense and maybe even a key part of their leadership. He's just turned 27 before the season starts, and he'll immediately become the power play quarterback, a 25-minute a night player, and easily capable of topping the 40-point mark for years on end. I would say a very solid physical and defensive player as well. A great addition, and instantly will become a fan favorite in Chicago. And I think he's going to be an all-star for years in that setup.
Geoff, anything to add there?
I agree with Paul. I think this is a pretty big uptick for Seth Jones's fantasy value. I mean, this is the 11th ranked power play from last season. That's without Jonathan Toews on the team and the Blackhawks. And he's moving on from the Blue Jackets, who had one of the worst power plays, and he was splitting time. The Blackhawks really don't have any other power play quarterback there. Obviously, they traded Boyquist to get Seth Jones as well. I think Seth Jones, you're going to see him return to that 40 to 50 point ratio. I think he's going to play a lot of minutes. Regardless of what I think of the Blackhawks as a team, they're clearly making moves. They should be healthier next year. Yeah, Seth Jones is a guy, definitely you should expect an uptick in fantasy production.
Let's keep going with this. And, fittingly enough, obviously, the producers do a good job and we can link everything together question by question. Let's talk more about Columbus. Paul, we'll go back to you. A trade, obviously, Cam Atkinson and Jakub Voracek were swapped. So who's the winner in this deal?
You know what? They profile both very similarly, though Voracek is significantly larger in terms of body size. That's the biggest difference between these two guys. I think they're both very capable scorers, both very capable of being part of the leadership crews for their new teams. But I think Voracek's going to benefit a little bit more from a defined role in the top six over in Columbus, because he was moved all the way up and down the lineup for the last couple of years in Philadelphia. And I think he's going to see a more prominent role, maybe even a first-line role with his new club. And I think that's going to be better for him. He's a very capable scorer, one of the better playmaking wingers as well. And I think that's going to be the difference between the two players. I think this guy is going to thrive more than Atkinson will in the Philadelphia setup. I don't think you can guarantee him a first line role because he's going to be behind Travis Konechny on that right side.
Moose, what do you say?
Yeah, from a depth chart perspective, Atkinson takes a little bit of a blow. I still like Atkinson more, especially as a fantasy player. He's a way higher volume shot producer, which again, I like the move for Philly. I mean, they're saving money on an average salary, and I personally think they're getting the better player. Atkinson also will pick up shorthanded minutes and stuff like that. Voracek does a lot of the same things, like Paul said. It just feels like his production has gone down. He's been moved around the lineup, but part of that has been he really just hasn't been that productive, whereas Atkinson really has been carrying a bad offense at times for Columbus. So I would still say I like Atkinson more from a fantasy perspective. I'm just not sold that Voracek's going to do much at Columbus. Columbus obviously just doing a bit of a fire sale here, and I'm not sure what they're going to look like. So I don't know if I want any part of anyone on Columbus next year. I do like Atkinson, though. I think he'll be part of the top six for Philly.
Who's the winner here, AJ?
Well, I think the real winner is me now that I can draft Voracek. He's no longer on my no flyers prohibited list here. So that's the real winner here. No, but in all seriousness, I do think Voracek is the probably individual winner in my opinion, because he'll for sure be on that top line, possibly with Patrick Laine, number one power play as well, and can just feed pucks over to Laine. Meanwhile, Atkinson will have to anchor his own line, likely still a top six, like Geoff said, but he'll have to anchor his own line, and he'll be playing with the surgically rebuilt Kevin Hayes. So there's obviously some concerns as to what sort of level of play we'll get out of Kevin Hayes right out the gate.
Looks like the other end of that Fleury deal is going to be Michael Hakkarainen, who is a center 2018 draft pick, hasn't played in the NHL yet, fifth rounder. So just to clue people in on what, once the trade call is made, this is going to look like. Guys, let's move on to just in general. And there have been so many moves, obviously. And AJ, we'll go right back to you. Do you have a favorite that you've had so far this offseason?
I mean, I like everything. I know it's kind of a punt here, but I like everything that Seattle has done. I think they brought in a really good group of guys. It's maybe not as flashy as some of the moves that we saw Vegas pull off, and Seattle was working with a bit more of a handicap when you consider the fact that everybody felt like they got burned by these side deals, these, trade consideration deals from Vegas, and weren't willing to do so. So I really think Seattle made a good work with what they had available. I like the opportunity for Chris Driedger to be a number one guy in this league. I think they've got a solid netminder in him. And it sounds like they're getting pretty close to bringing in Jaden Schwartz, which would be a good upgrade for them as well.
Jeff, what do you think? Favorite move?
I mean, I love what the Kraken did on defense and in net as well. I agree there. My favorite move, though, is going to be another goalie, Alex Nedeljkovic, to the Detroit Red Wings. Again, this is a player who kind of carried things for the Carolina Hurricanes at point last year. He's a young goalie, and now he goes to the Red Wings, to an insanely young team. And I think it's perfect move for Detroit. You get a young goalie for relatively cheap. Now you can grow with the team. I think for fantasy purposes too, I love this because he should see a ton of shots on goal. And like Marc-Andre Fleury, probably going to be a very good fantasy option. So I like the Nedeljkovic move by the Red Wings.
Paul, what stood out to you?
I've got a couple of favorites in the recent flurry of trades, guys. My favorite move, though, is that Florida adding Sam Reinhart, a 25-goal scorer in Buffalo last year in that mess. He'll move to Alex Barkov's right wing and should easily top the 45-point total from last season and could even threaten his career high of 65 points set 3 seasons ago. But I'd be remiss if I didn't get a shot across AJ's bow without mentioning the Flyers moves to bolster their blue line with the addition of a pair of veteran blue liners. First, they add 30-year-old Ryan Ellis, and AJ knows how much I like this guy for years. He's a very productive and quality two-way player who will log tons of ice time and be a key power play role for them. They also add Rasmus Ristolainen, 27 years old. This guy's a giant, 6'4", 225, and also has great offensive skills, though is a bit suspect defensively. He'll be insulated in that way in his new surroundings. I think that'll lend an uptick to his profile as well. He's been a rumored trade chip for Buffalo for a long time, but should be more comfortable next season. And he's playing for a new contract, guys. He's on a $5.4 million cap hit, and he'll have every incentive to play to his top levels to maintain that level of living for him and his family.